Hey everyone, it's Nux, and in today's video, I want to take some time off from covering more recent gaming subjects and looking back to the past with a special countdown video. It's been a while since I've done one of these countdown videos, but let's just move on to the main topic. As 2019 came to a close, a common thing that many people were doing on both Twitter and YouTube was outlining their favorite video games throughout the last decade, being from 2010 all the way up to 2019. Obviously, it's 2021 now, and I'm clearly very late to the trend, once again. But despite this fact, I still want to take the time to outline my favorite games throughout the last decade, all in one video, because I just want to take the time to really look back on my favorite gaming experiences and re-explore them to show why I love gaming so much. The way that I'm personally going to do this is by going through each year and then naming what my favorite video game of that year was, giving a brief explanation as to why it was my favorite game of that year, and then moving on to the next year. And then towards the end, I'll have some honorable mentions to games that were close to making the cut, but didn't just by a hair. And for extra fun, at the very end, I'll be awarding one of the games that I talked about my personal ranking of the game of the decade, being my favorite game of all the ones I covered, and my favorite game of the last decade. Last few notes before we begin. Firstly, let's make clear that this is just my personal feelings about this topic, and it's all pretty much my opinion, and not necessarily fact or the ideal list. Also, spoiler alert, but most of my list is a lot of yeah. So if you're not a fan of that, all I can ask is for you to look elsewhere for a list that acquires your taste. Though if you're not a big Nintendo fan, why are you really here in the first place? What else could you be here for? Oh yeah. Anyway, in terms of rules for this countdown, one thing is that this will be going by North American release dates and the time period of when I played these games. Because of that, there will be some games you'll probably say don't count for a year, but in this video, I don't care. They count to me. Alright, with that out of the way, let's go. First up on my list is my game of the year for 2010. Now, if there's one series that I've played to death and have put more time and money into than any other, it is without a doubt the Pokemon series. I've been playing the Pokemon games since Pokemon Blue back on my original Game Boy, and I've always found a fun time to be had in the series throughout the years. But in 2010, the sprite-based Pokemon games basically hit their peak, with the latest installment at that time, Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I specifically owned Pokemon Heart Gold, and I remember being so excited for this game due to finally getting another set of mainline Pokemon remakes. And man, did the game not underdeliver. Despite Johto being one of my lesser favorite regions of Pokemon, the remix expanded the Johto duo of games with all sorts of improved changes and features. Whether it be the reimagined look for the region, the slapping new remixes to classic Gen 2 tracks, the added content from modern games, such as Pokemon Platinum's version of the Battle Frontier, I could honestly spend hours just going over all the cool things that Heart Gold and Soul Silver added to the Johto region. And they not only brought back all the cool old stuff, like the ability to explore a second region with Kanto, before it got overused to death, but also added more new Pokemon to catch. They just went all out. And considering this was back when I practically lived and breathed Pokemon, I have no choice but to give this year to these set of games. Even if they are technically old games by this point in time, these remakes added such a drastically fresh coat of paint to the games that they basically felt like a whole new release. Okay, so this one is going to be kind of cheating, because Minecraft as a video game technically made its debut all the way back in 2009 with Minecraft Classic. But it wasn't until 2011 that the game was fully released, and contained a lot of the major features that the game has to this day. So yeah, this one is stretching a bit, I'm not going to lie. But since this is my video, my rules, and my perspective, I'm going to count it in. Besides, I'm probably not going to get another chance to talk about Minecraft like this again. Minecraft was a sandbox 3D indie phenomenon where you obviously mine and craft. I'm really bad at this enticing description stuff, but come on, do I really need to explain what Minecraft is? It's one of the best-selling video games of all time, and was an experience that was very different from any other games at that time. Instead of focusing on one specific thing like action, platforming, story, and all of that, Minecraft is a game that can be so many different things depending on how you play. You can peacefully build your own structures and lands with various materials and tools. You can go on an epic survival adventure where you get by through limited supplies and the skin of your teeth. It's a game with a lot of options and freedom, and it's that versatility that really stands Minecraft out from other games. Sure, there are all sorts of games where you can make your own levels, make your own characters, and that stuff. But Minecraft was a game where you can craft your own experiences through this one simple, unique, blocky engine. And unlike some of the other games on this list, where their legacy is held up through sequels, Minecraft is just a game that keeps growing naturally through updates and continued community support. And growing up with some of the earlier updates and playing this game with my friends back in the day were some of my most fond gaming memories. And for that reason, Minecraft earns this spot on my list. Oh, Kid Icarus Uprising. You were quite the surprising banger of a game in the year 2012. I still remember it like it was yesterday, watching E3 2010 with my brothers, being absolutely amazed at the reveal of the Nintendo 3DS, and suddenly we're hit with this trailer for this game starring that one weird angel kid from Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Like, Pit as a character and his series was practically just a dead Nintendo IP that was rotting away in their vault, and just so happened to make its way into Smash Bros. By chance, like the Ice Climbers. But rather than let the IP rot away into nothingness, Smash Bros. Creator Sakurai took this series that had no significance or identity and breathed so much life and charm into it. In just one game, Sakurai took this random IP and turned it into one of the best games in Nintendo's lineup, featuring a lot of cool and memorable characters wrapped in a great story, really flashy and fun gameplay, a crazy good soundtrack, and even stuff outside the game like the cool little tie-in anime shorts were just so good. It's crazy how much life this one game managed to have, being based off an IP that only had one random game on the NES as its highlight. I'll never get over this, or this game, and for that reason, it is easily one of my favorite games of the last decade. So for those of you who may have caught a glimpse at the beta version of my list on this video topic, you might be surprised to see this, as there was another game here originally. But after replaying Super Mario 3D World and really remembering all the fun I had with this game, I just decided to move the original 2013 pick to honorable mentions. But yeah, Super Mario 3D World. This game has been quite the roller coaster when it comes to general reception. It was originally disliked by many Nintendo and Mario fans due to the lack of a true 3D sandbox Mario game since Super Mario Sunshine, and many people wrote it off for being a generic game that just quote-unquote lazily follows Super Mario 3D Land's format, but I always disagreed with those types of views on the game. Even though 3D World wasn't the big 3D Mario experience the Wii U desperately needed, it was still a very fun game in its own right. And while some elements of it can definitely still be generic, there's a lot of weird and wacky charm to 3D World that actually stands it out and gives it its own identity. I mean, this is the game where Mario and friends turn into cats as one of their main new abilities. 3D World had a lot of creative levels with really well-balanced level design, some cool new enemies, and a lot of mayhem, especially if you're actually trying to 100% the game and see all the craziness it has to offer. One thing I really love about this game is its multiplayer, and how the different characters you play as actually have unique traits that stand them out in the gameplay. This wasn't a new concept to Mario, but it was really good to have this in a modern mainline Mario game, especially since this came around the time of the new Super Mario Bros. Era, where it was starting to feel like Mario was becoming insanely boring and safe. Granted, this is still an ongoing issue, but I personally think 3D World was one of the true first games to combat that problem, and brought some much needed energy back into Mario, which is why it is one of my favorite games of the last decade. Last thing I'll say is that the game's soundtrack is really good. A lot of what I just said for Super Mario 3D World can ironically be applied to my pick for the 2014 Game of the Year, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Poor Tropical Freeze was yet another Wii U game that was revealed and hyped up at the wrong places around the wrong time. The Wii U desperately needed big AAA games from underutilized Nintendo franchises, especially due to the terrible droughts that the system experienced. But sadly, Nintendo was just very keen on pushing stuff like 2D platformers of series that already had them, or minigame collections. Granted, these were solid games most of the time, but their timing was just terrible, because people were tired of these games. However, despite its bad timing, I can't say that it makes Tropical Freeze a bad game, because the truth about Tropical Freeze to me is that it was one of the freshest 2D platformers I had played in ages. Did it revolutionize the 2D platformer genre with a really good story presentation or new mechanics not found in other games? Not really. But it did, however, expand on so many concepts and great things from the previous Donkey Kong Country games and other 2D platformers. It had so many creative levels and themes, challenging but interesting boss fights, a great presentation, and best of all, it featured what is probably one of my favorite gaming soundtracks of all time. David Wise and any other musicians there absolutely killed it. So with all of these factors and more, I just have to give this spot to Tropical Freeze. I know, 2014 was a very good year for games, and there's definitely some other games I could give this spot to, but I have to give it to Tropical Freeze for being the game that reignited my love for 2D platformers. "2015 and 2016 were a very interesting time to be a Nintendo fan. And by interesting, I mean that it absolutely sucked. 2015 was basically the year that confirmed the death of the Wii 100%. And the 3DS wasn't doing much better either, as it was getting a lot of really disappointing or straight low quality titles that I did not enjoy all too much. So being someone who loves Nintendo as one of my main gaming fronts, 2015 specifically was a rough year for me, as there was nothing that great from them I could call a game of the year. They still had some great games, don't get me wrong, but just not as many. However, around the latter half of 2015, there was a small indie title making the rounds on the internet, and it was growing into this huge gaming phenomenon unlike any other in years, and that game's name is Undertale. Undertale was an RPG game designed by Toby Fox that takes the usual concepts of what makes an RPG and twists them, Instead of being a hero killing enemies with crazy magic spells or defeating them with powerful weapons, you are just a child who is trying to survive and escape this very strange underground world filled with monsters. But the monsters aren't just mindless enemies. Every monster you encounter has a personality to them, and the game encourages you to evade their attacks and actually try to befriend them. Granted, you still can just fight them normally and kill whatever's in your way, but well, let's just say that those actions have consequences. Undertale definitely isn't the first game to play with this type of morality system, but it did it in such a unique way that it was a really different experience from other games I've played. It helps that Undertale is also heavily inspired by Earthbound, and for longtime followers of my channel, you know that the Earthbound games are some of my favorite games ever. So between filling the long empty void of wanting something like Earthbound again, between its really fun cast of characters and weird charm, and once again, being yet another game with an amazing soundtrack, Undertale won me over and became a highlight of mine from the last decade. So as I said before, 2015 and 2016 were a rough time to be a Nintendo fan. 2016 was definitely a little worse because the Wii U was basically fully dead and the Nintendo gaming news around that time was drier than a desert. 2016 wasn't completely devoid of any good games at all, but you definitely had to step outside the Nintendo camp if you wanted to experience many good new ones. 2016 overall was just not a fun year for me, so I ended up not playing many games at all. So by default, I have to give this spot to one of the few games I actually beat and really enjoyed that year: Kirby Planet Robobot. Now, my relationship with this game is weird. Originally, I was a little peeved at this game because I was still really thirsty for an HD mainline console Kirby game that follows up directly on Return to Dreamland's greatness. But the more I learned about this game, the more intrigued I became. The main plot has Kirby's homeworld basically getting straight roboticized. You have this evil business corporation turning Kirby's usual friends and foes into killer robots. And Kirby's new weapon to combat this is a freaking mech straight out of a mecha anime. It was so bizarre. But once I dove into the gameplay of this game, any doubts I had were eviscerated. The gameplay of the Robobot armor, alongside what is basically the Return to Dreamland formula at near perfection, made this into one of my favorites of the last decade. I was still annoyed that the Wii U never got a mainline Kirby game, but it was hard to stay mad with a game like this. It has some of the best abilities in the series, with ones like ESP and the return of Mirror Kirby. The Robobot armor had really cool ability combinations and made the puzzles and bosses of that game so much crazier than usual. And the fan service and references to older games was insane, and only got wilder in future installments since this one. I love Kirby games, and while many see Kirby as one of Nintendo's more basic franchises, it will always be one of my favorites without question. In a way, I'm kind of glad Planet Robobot has earned this spot, as Return to Dreamland was so close to getting a Game of the Year spot, but just didn't by a pinch. And I feel that Kirby needed some representation here, because Kirby in the 2010s era was great. Alright, aside from the fact that I had a beta version of this list floating around, these next few Game of the Year picks I'm going to list are not going to be much of a surprise to you all if you just follow my channel and other social media on a daily basis. Like, for these games, I almost feel like I don't even need to explain much as to why they were my favorite games for their respective years, because it's not a secret that I was absolutely crazy for them, and still am to this day. First up, my pick for 2017. Now, 2017 was a crazy year, not just on the Nintendo front, but on the gaming front as a whole. So many amazing games came out that year, and I still haven't even played them all. It was a great time. And for many people, I imagine it would be hard to pick a single game to represent it. But my winner for this spot has to go to none other than The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Now, I'm not going to get too wordy on why this game earned this spot for two reasons. One, I still have a separate review video on this game in the works, and I'll be saying plenty about it there if I can ever finish it. And two, the game's praise by others just speaks for itself at this point. Breath of the Wild was a refreshing gaming experience that came at a time where I was really burning out on gaming as a whole. And so, because of that, it earned my spot for my 2017 Game of the Year. For 2018, I almost can't even tell if this is a more predictable choice or not. But screw it. Even though you all saw it coming from a mile away, I don't care. Because Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is without a doubt one of the best games that was released this last decade. And I'd even go as far as to argue it's one of the best games of the last generation. I mean, do I really need to sit here and explain why a game where you can play as Mario, Sonic, Pac-Man, Mega Man, Cloud Strife, and freaking Steve from Minecraft all in the same game is a good game? Jokes aside, besides how crazy this game is as a crossover, it is, in my opinion, the closest we have to the perfect Smash Bros. Game. It has a great roster, really great multiplayer options, fun side content like the expanded stage builder mode, and the gameplay is just really solid in what I believe is the best of both worlds between the competitive nature of Smash and the more casual side of it. Now, is the game perfect? No, not at all, as there is still a lot of flaws and nitpicks with this game that I could rant about for quite some time. But despite the flaws of this game, they just can't take away from the sheer quality and scope of this game. It is one of Nintendo's most ambitious projects, and even though Sakurai and the Smash team can still improve in some areas, they deserve all the praise they get for this game, because it is a game that really highlights the magic of gaming at its best. We now arrive to the final game of the year in my lineup for this list. And as I've said, this is a game that shouldn't be too surprising to you all. But I'm honestly surprised myself at how much I ended up loving this game, considering its primary focus is level creation. Yes, I'm talking about Super Mario Maker 2. For the longest time, I'd always wanted a Mario level editor game, and the original Mario Maker delivered on that. But I always felt that the game was limited in areas and could do so much more with what it had established. Super Mario Maker 2 basically takes the foundation of the original Mario Maker and cranks it up by 11. It adds so many more level themes, enemies to use, and most importantly, slopes. The amount of options at your disposal to create levels is just beautiful, and the post-launch updates took what was already a really solid expansion to Mario Maker's core and basically turned it into a near-perfect 2D Mario game. I mean, we actually finally got the Mario level world creator I had wanted since I was a kid. You can practically make your own Mario game with this game. It's confusing, I know. But to finish summarizing, Super Mario Maker 2 was easily my favorite game of 2019 because I sunk so many hours into it. Between its single player campaign, its local and online multiplayer, and all of that. It is one of the best Mario experiences in the series, and it would be criminal not to feature it on a list like this. So now that I've named all of my favorite games throughout the last decade, I want to take some time to briefly highlight other games in this time period that I really enjoyed. This is in no particular order or anything, but again, some of these games just barely missed my main list by a few inches, so consider them just as noteworthy. First up, despite my gripes with certain Fire Emblem characters in Smash Bros., yes, a Fire Emblem game has made it here, being Fire Emblem Awakening. This was the game that really got me into the series, and I absolutely loved playing this game back in the 3DS days. I mentioned it before, but Kirby's Return to Dreamland. This game is basically my favorite Kirby game of all time, and was a multiplayer game I loved playing with my brothers. I wish I could go back to the days of playing this game. Pokemon Black and White, as well as its sequel set of games, also get a shout out on this list, as they're also really great Pokemon games I played to death back then. Next up are some more Wii U games that I loved playing. First, I have to shout out the game that nearly earned my 2014 Game of the Year spot, but lost it by just a bit, and that is Pikmin 3. The wait for this game from Pikmin 2 was unbearable, but the hype cycle leading up to it and the actual game were amazing. Two huge games I have to shout out are Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS, and Mario Kart 8. Smash Bros. For Wii U and 3DS earns its shout out solely because of how magical those days were. The hype cycle, the fun aspects of the Smash community, and just all of it was in an amazingly beautiful time. And the actual game was pretty good too, even though Smash Ultimate basically renders it a little obsolete in a lot of ways these days. And Mario Kart 8 kind of just explains itself if you see my videos and tweets on it. It's my current favorite Mario Kart game. And the last Wii U game is Super Mario Maker. Even though Super Mario Maker 2 blew this game out the water, I will always have respect for the original for building the foundation. That and this installment had its own unique charm and fun that wasn't fully replicated with the sequel in some ways. Of course, I can't do honorable mentions and not bring up Super Mario Odyssey. If it weren't for Breath of the Wild, this game would probably be my 2017 Game of the Year. It is one of the most creative and fun Mario games ever. I may also do a separate review video for this game as well, but I'm not going to make any promises on that. Man, there's a part of me that doesn't want to do this, but I have to shout out Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania. This is going to sound harsh, but these games basically earn their shout out for being the only decent Sonic games we got in the entire 2010s era to me. I have a lot of gripes with both of these games in this current time period, but despite that, I can't deny that these games were really solid and that I enjoyed them. So there's the Sonic representation. And for my last honorable mention pick, I'm going to shout out a game that's drastically different from the other ones I've mentioned thus far, but I had to bring it in. That being Batman Arkham City. I was absolutely obsessed with the Batman Arkham games, being a big Batman and superhero fan overall. It was so cool to get a game with this level of detail and polish. Come a long way from games like Superman 64. Those were all of my favorite games throughout the last decade. Like I said, a lot of Nintendo stuff, I know. My variety in terms of gaming is not the best, and it's something that I'm always trying to improve on by clearing up more non-Nintendo games off my backlog. And I'm also aware that there's a lot more games I could have considered or at least mentioned. So if there's any game that you think I slept on, let me know in the comments. But now it's time to choose which one of these games was my personal game of the decade. Now, despite how much I love all of these games, it really only comes down to two of them. And the Game of the Decade nominee finalists are definitely Smash Ultimate and Breath of the Wild. I really want to give it to Smash Ultimate, just for having what is basically one of the greatest character rosters in gaming history, if not the best. But, despite how much I love the game and want to claim it as my favorite, one thing that holds Smash Ultimate back is the fact that it's not the most revolutionary game to define the last decade. Smash Ultimate's structure is basically the near peak of a formula that's been building up since the original game. It's definitely evolved a lot, but the fact that we also had Smash Wii U and 3DS kind of took away from that game's impact. Especially due to the fact that Smash Ultimate largely builds off the steps and missteps of that game. Breath of the Wild, on the other hand, was an entirely new take to the 3D open world genre. It shook up so much about the Zelda formula, and its game design was just drastically different from other games released in this time period. Again, I'll cover more about it in my review video on that game, but basically, what I'm saying is that my game of the decade has to go to Breath of the Wild for being a really fresh gaming experience unlike any other, and being one of the most fun games I'd played in this entire time period. If there was one game I wished I could experience blind all over again, it would be Breath of the Wild. The only thing I wouldn't want to relive is the time frame it took from the reveal of this game to its actual final release. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to leave a like and leave a comment letting me know what your thoughts are on my picks, or give me some games you enjoyed over the last decade. Last thing I'll mention is to be sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new to it for more videos like this one. And follow my social media such as my Twitter for updates on the channel and more of my thoughts on video games. This has been 𝗃𝗂𝗀𝗶𝗰, and I'm out. Peace.